in the middle of the night. In the middle of the night, in the river of dreams.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Another one of my favorites by one of my favorite artists. Thank you. Awesome. Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Sunday to you. Thanks for being here, and thanks for joining us on this wonderful, warm day. We do have air conditioning, thank you, God. Well, we've been working with the idea of being a dreamer. And we've been doing a multi-generational curriculum, and so the kids are actually working on the same theme. And our theme this week is what is and what can be. And I just even love that phrase, to be honest. What is and what can be, because there's a powerful awareness and lesson even in just recognizing that those two states of being. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that and how we use those kinds of awarenesses to help us move into what's possible in our lives. We talked about earlier on about how we are brought into being and that we are created in the image and after the likeness of that which is the Creator, which means that we are creative beings ourselves. We're created out of that which is that which creates. Does that make sense? And so part of what our work and our mission and what we're doing here in life is creating and learning how to do that in a conscious way. Do that in a way that we are really more aware of what we're creating, how we're creating, and the ways that we're doing it, and the ways that we are doing it, and being able to shift from creating things that we're not wanting to have and experience in our lives into creating more of what we really do want to experience in our lives. And then last week we talked a little bit about the importance of holding a vision to be able to create what we want in life, and talked about the power of imagination and how our imagination is one of the most powerful gifts and tools that we have for creating the kinds of experiences that we want to create in life. Albert Einstein said imagination is more important than knowledge. That we actually are using this gift of imagination all the time, and it's valuable for us to begin to pay attention and notice what our imaginings are helping to shape and to form in our experiences in life. Does that make sense? Ashley Brilliant has a wonderful little thing called Pot Shots, and he says, all my dreams have come and gone except one, a dream called reality. So I think it's valuable for us to think about, when we think about dreams, oftentimes, I remember, I don't know if you guys had this experience or not, but I was a master at daydreaming when I was a kid. I mean, I just had daydreaming down pat. And I would spend hours oftentimes, usually in class, looking out the window, dreaming of where I wanted to be. And got in trouble for that quite a bit. And I know a lot of people would say, you need to come back to reality. You need to be grounded. You need to be present here. Well, I think there's some real truth in that, except there's also an important awareness that we do need to be daydreaming. We need to dream in our daytime about what is possible for us. And yet we don't necessarily want to ignore or try to use daydreaming or dreaming itself as a way of trying to escape from what is. And so we're not here to try and say, well, we just ignore everything that's going on and then we just live in our dreams. But we do use our dreams as a way of moving us from point A to point B. Make sense? In fact, you will never ever get to point B unless you can have an image and awareness, a vision of the possibilities of moving to point B. We wouldn't even have an inkling or a motivation to try and even move in that direction. So whether we realize it or not, we actually, when we decide to get up and leave here today and you decide to go to lunch, dinner, home, wherever you're going to go, you don't have the possibility of even doing that unless there's somewhere in your energy and your consciousness an idea or a vision or a possibility, a thought of some form that's helping to move you in that direction. And that's true in almost everything that we experience in life. That we are in the process of moving from one state of being into another state of being, and we're in that process continually. And so it's valuable, I think, for us to look at our current reality and get an awareness about what our current reality is. One of my favorite sayings is, and I forget where exactly it came from. I know the late Robin Williams stated it, and I've always found it valuable. Reality, what a concept. It's important for us to recognize that what we are seeing and thinking and feeling and experiencing out here in the world ultimately is a concept. It is a belief system. That what we're really experiencing is something that is a filtered awareness. And so, in order for us to move into allowing our dreams and our visions to come more into reality, it's not a matter of trying to push away from what's going on in life, but trying to allow that to be shaped and formed through the power of our imagination. But one of the most valuable and practical tools that I've learned in my life over the years came from a wonderful book called The Path of Least Resistance. This is by a guy named Robert Fritz. Anybody familiar with this work? If you've not run across this one, I highly recommend it. It's one of the most practical tools for using our power of creation to move from where we are to where we want to be. But one of the things that he talks about in here is that one of the most significant things we can do to get from point A to point B is to recognize that we're at point A. It's really challenging to get to point B if you don't really know that you're at point A, right? And so it's not that we're trying to spend our time and energy trying to jump out of point A, but we do need to recognize the current state of our experiences and recognize that the current state of our experiences is what we call reality, but reality is basically a manifested, well, the best way to say it is whatever you're experiencing right now in your life, whether you like it or whether you don't like it, what we are experiencing, what I'm experiencing right now, is a result and a product of thoughts and feelings and beliefs and attitudes and experiences that I had yesterday, the day before, maybe the day before that. Some would say even the life before that. I don't know, maybe, I'm open for that possibility. But we are standing in this moment in an experience that is a result of a belief system, and oftentimes a collective belief system, of what is real. And so the current reality is created by our past thinking, our past belief systems. Our future reality is being created in this moment, right now, with what we're thinking, what we're feeling, what we are believing, what we're holding to. And so you ask yourself the question, is the future that you're creating right now, is this what you want to create? Think about what's going on inside of you right now. Now, let's be totally clear about this. I'm not talking about simply just your conscious thinking and belief system, because we also recognize that we are actually thinking and feeling and believing on a deeper level, aren't we? There's a level of our awareness that we are not consciously aware of. Let me say it differently. There's a level of our consciousness that we are not consciously aware of. So we have an unconscious, and a lot of times our experiences are coming out of thoughts and feelings and attitudes and beliefs that we've held for a very long time, oftentimes from very core beliefs. And those core beliefs could be things like simple little things, like, I can't. Sometimes that becomes a core belief, just those two words. And I would say it's one of the most limiting and one of the most challenging core beliefs that we tend to buy into and accept. Think about the different ways that you have used that phrase in your life. And think about how many times that has held you back from experiencing something, a greater possibility perhaps. Garrison Keillor a while back said, sometimes you have to look reality in the eye and deny it completely. Because what is a result of our thoughts. You see, our thoughts create our our feelings. Our thoughts and our feelings create our belief systems. Our thoughts, feelings, and belief systems create our experiences, and our experiences oftentimes create other thoughts. And those thoughts in those experiences are really what we need to pay attention to. We need to pay attention to what are the thoughts and feelings that are going on as we're experiencing something. And if that thought and feeling is creating more of the same kind of thoughts and of experiences, then we have in that moment the opportunity to change. We have in that moment the opportunity to shift, the opportunity to look beyond the appearances, as Jesus talked about. He said, look beyond appearances, but judge with right judgment. And so that really kind of helps us to think about reality. Liza Minnelli says that reality is something that you rise above. I love that saying. Reality is something that you rise above. It is a temporary experience of what is. But what is not the truth. See, it's valuable for us to begin to recognize in our lives, and this is one of our big lessons, I think, for all of us as we are learning and growing spiritually. Learning how to recognize the difference between what we're seeing and experiencing, what we call reality, and our interpretations of what we're seeing and experiencing. Most of the time, a good bit of the time anyway, we are caught up in not what is, but our interpretations and assumptions about what is. And so we can have an experience in life and we can get caught up in our belief systems about that experience rather than really recognizing and just simply observing the experience itself. One of the most freeing things we can do is begin to practice simply observing what is and noticing when we're putting interpretations on top of what is. So, for example, we're diagnosed with an illness. Perhaps it's a very challenging and difficult illness. Perhaps it's one that has been, quote, listed as terminal. Myrtle Fillmore had one of those. She had an experience where she was told that she was probably going to be sick the rest of her life and die very young. It was a fact at that time. And I think it's valuable for us to recognize facts, but also understand that facts are not necessarily the truth. Does that make sense? The truth was that she was a child of God, and she did not inherit sickness. And if we can really begin to practice that understanding and look beyond the facts, look beyond the belief systems about what is, it doesn't mean that you ignore the facts. So, for example, one of the things we talk about in Unity, we talked about this in our men's group yesterday, and it came up in that in Unity we teach a practice called affirmations, which is holding positive statements, but we also teach a very powerful practice that's been over the decades been called denial. Now, there's a form of denial that we know that is not really practical. I prefer to use the term release statements because it really is more about letting go of particular thoughts and ideas and belief systems that are not really serving or creating the kind of experiences that we want to have in our life. They're not experiences that are aligned with the truth of our being. And so when we're working with denials, the example that came to me is actually a lesson I remember doing when I was in ministerial school that occurred to me during my meditation I had during that time, and I was doing a talk at that time. And so imagine yourself on a train track, and you're standing on a train track, and a train is coming. And you can see the train coming down the track. It's heading right for you. And oftentimes what we've been taught to do is to use a denial in this way. There is no train, 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 there is no train. There's no train. That's not a real healthy use of denial, folks. We want to move into an understanding that the denial really isn't about the fact that there is no train. When you have something that's going on with you physically, notice it, pay attention to it, observe it, acknowledge it. love it even for that matter. But recognize that it's not the truth of who and what you are. It's not a permanent experience or state of being. It is simply what is in the moment. And that was created because of some other experience or thought and belief system. So when you're on the track and the train's coming down the pike, you don't just simply say there is no train. But what you can do is say, I see the train. I recognize there's a train coming. I acknowledge it. But you know what? The train really has no power over me because I have the power to make a choice. What's the choice? Get off the track. We get off the track. You make a decision. I'm not stuck here. I'm not willing to stay in this particular situation and circumstance. I'm not willing to allow a train to run over me in this situation. I can make a different choice. I can move in a different direction. And so that's a powerful and enabling and empowering use of the faculty of denial and release statements. And so when we're dealing with dreams, it's important for us to recognize that we do need to acknowledge what is, but recognize that what is only, in some ways, it's like a phantom of what was. And we need to acknowledge it, but then we move on from there and we really focus on what it is that can be and what are the possibilities for each and every one of us. And that's one of the things this wonderful work of Path of Least Resistance does. He gives a great technique and a great example. One of the things that happens with us is that our subconscious mind really doesn't like dissonance or inharmony or conflict between what is and what can be. And one of the ways that it deals with that is it helps move us it either moves us back toward what was, or it moves us in the direction of what can be. So think about it this way. You've got a rubber band around you, and you're standing in what is, and when you set out an intention or a vision for yourself, you are actually looping a rubber band around what's possible. And there's something within you that will create a tension within your unconscious that will help move you in that direction. It's like it's pulling you. And so when we do set an intention, it's not that we're trying to necessarily escape from what is. What we're trying to do is simply set an intention because we know that intention can help pull us into that possibility. One of my favorite sayings that I came across some years ago, and I don't even know where this came from, but one of my friends always had it on his email, and it says, there are many possibilities in life. The one that is to be is up to me. The one that is to be is up to me. So we have an opportunity to help bring into our experiences the kinds of realities that we want to have more experience of. There's a principle that we talk about in Unity that is, I think, at the heart and the key of this. And the principle is, where attention goes, energy flows. So let me say a little bit more about how that works with this particular dynamic. When we're in a situation and we're constantly just simply focusing on where we want to be, there's a value in that, and you want to put most of your energy toward that. But interestingly enough, if you are not necessarily dealing with or looking at or accepting where you are and what is, whether you realize it or not, whether you're conscious of it or not, you're actually putting energy in to try and pushing away what is. You follow me? There is whether it's intentional or conscious or not, you're actually putting your energy toward trying to get out of where you are. And where attention goes, energy flows. So think about that for just a moment. When we think about the law of attraction, when we're putting our energy into pushing away an experience of what is, we're actually giving more energy to what is. Make sense? And therefore we are drawing to us more of that same kind of energy and that same kind of experience. So it doesn't mean that we're going to ignore what is. The reality is that if we are trying to ignore what is or trying to push it away, that's an energy that's actually keeping us in many ways stuck. And so the power to release that comes in the ability and the willingness to simply acknowledge what is, and then move from that space of acknowledging into knowing and understanding that that's not the permanent reality, truth of all being, that it's a state of experience, and that we can move beyond that. We can move into something more, we can move into greater. So we're not stuck. We're not stuck in what is, but if we allow ourselves to acknowledge what is, it allows us to know where our first step is. It's kind of hard to move, they say a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. It's kind of hard to take that first step if you don't know where you're at. And so part of our work is to recognize this is where I am, and this is where I'm going, and this is what's becoming, and this is why we are moving in this direction. Are you aware that physicists have found that if they seek to measure a particular particle as a wave, not only the particle actually becomes a wave when they try to measure it as a particle. But if they try to measure the particle as a wave, it ceases to be measurable as a wave. It actually then moves back into becoming a particle. From this, physicists have decided that scientists actually cannot call themselves observers of an experiment. There are no true observers of an experiment. But instead, they are actually participants in the experiment. They, by simply observing what's going on in a particular physics experiments about particles and waves, they are actually affecting what is and how they are showing up. Does that make sense? I'm going to suggest to you, whether we realize it or not, we are doing the same thing. That we are absolutely a part of creating our experiences, and part of our work is to begin to awaken to the possibility that our own consciousness is the key to creating the next manifestation of not just the particle, but our experiences in our lives. Emmett Fox had this wonderful pamphlet called The Golden Key. How many of you are familiar with the Golden Key? It's a very simple, very powerful principle in life. And I'm going to give it to you in just a summary. When you find yourself faced with a problem, and I'm going to add a little bit to what he points out. When you find yourself faced with a problem, how do you know if you're faced with a problem unless you first acknowledge there's a problem, right? So I'm going to suggest that one of the first steps is acknowledge, okay, there's a problem here. Or there's something here that is not what I'd like it to be, right? So when you're faced with a problem, the golden key is stop thinking about the problem and think about God instead. Stop thinking about the problem and think about God instead. This is a very powerful tool and technique that's saved my hide so many times. Let me tell you a little story about that. When I was thinking and praying and visualizing going to Unity Ministerial School, I was making all the arrangements and doing all the things that I necessary, and I was really taking a step out in faith, because the reality is, in that moment, the reality was that I didn't have the funds to be able to go to ministerial school. And that was just the reality of that moment. It was real, though. It was absolutely real. I didn't have the funds to do it. I didn't know how it was going to happen. But I held on to my vision, and I also acknowledged that I didn't have the funds. And I have spent some time, doing negative affirmations. I'm just not going to happen. It's not going to work. I don't know, you know those? How's this ever going to work? And then I caught myself doing that, and I remember coming across this pamphlet again, and reading it again, and reading it a couple of times, and I said, okay, I'm going to stop thinking about that completely. I just completely put it out of my mind. I acknowledge that, yes, it's there, but I completely put it out of my mind, and every time that thought of, I don't know how I'm going to do this, it's not going to work, I can't, I stopped myself, I took a breath, and I started thinking about God. thinking about the divine, thinking about my source, thinking about the possibilities. I began shifting my thinking. And the very last week before I was supposed to go up to Unity Village, and you know, you were expected to have all your ducks in a row before you went up there, as David would tell you. And I felt like I did in some ways, but I didn't in others. And this is one way that I really didn't have my ducks in a row. And so I was actually at the Unity Church in Little Rock, Arkansas, and it was my last Sunday there. And I'd been the platform assistant at Unity Church in Little Rock, Arkansas for I think 2 years. And I was their sole platform assistant for that many years. And it was a great experience, great training, and I'm so grateful to Earl Anderson, who was a minister there at that time, for allowing me to have that kind of experience. As I was leaving the church that day, I said, I'd actually sent in, I had enough to send in the payment for my first semester, but you were supposed to actually have, I think, I forgot how many, months or of semesters saved up and ready for you, and I didn't have that. And so I left the service there, and Earl pulled me aside for a second. He says, he shook my hand, and he said, I wanted you to know that your ministerial school is paid for. I went, oh, yeah, I know. I sent my payment in yesterday. And he said, no. Your ministerial school is paid for. They paid for my whole 2 years of ministerial school. I hadn't asked, I hadn't imagined, for that matter, that they would be willing or able, but someone in that congregation came forward and said, we're going to pay for that. Yeah. Thank you, God. There's a shift that can happen in our experiences in our lives when we begin to practice some of these understandings. And as simple as they may seem, when we turn our thoughts and energies away from the challenges and the difficulties, we don't ignore them, we recognize them, we acknowledge them, but we move into the greater possibilities, and the universe conspires in our favor to bring even more possibilities into our lives. I'm going to read to you actually a short story here, and this is actually a synopsis of a story, a wonderful story by Nathaniel Hawthorne. And it's entitled The Great Stone Face. Any of you familiar with this one? Oh, you'll love it. The tale centers around a man named Ernest who grew up in a village renowned for a natural wonder that rested just outside its boundaries. Nature had majestically carved in the side of a mountain the feature of a human countenance so realistic that from a distance the great stone face seemed positively alive. All the features were noble and the expression was grand and sweet. Ernest, like all children of the nearby village, was told of an ancient prophecy that at some future day a child would be born in the vicinity who was destined to become the greatest personage of his time and whose countenance in manhood would bear an exact resemblance to the great stone face. Upon learning that the promised prophet had not yet appeared, the young Ernest clapped his hands above his head and exclaimed, I do hope that I shall live to see him. Ernest, growing older, never forgot the prophecy learned at his mother's knee. It was always on his mind, and as he grew into manhood, Ernest allowed the great stone face to become his teacher. Meditating upon the countenance, looking to it for comfort, reading stories about it, speaking of it to those who would hear, years passed. Many came to the village claiming to be the promised one. But each time Ernest went out to meet the pretenders, he came away disappointed and sometimes almost despondent. For although these impostors claimed the honor, Ernest knew better. As a result of his devotion to this face, he had become an expert on it. And surely Ernest, of all people, would know the one when it came. After each disappointment, Ernest would return to the face, peer into it, and ask, how long? The granite features seemed to reassure him. Fear not, Ernest, the man will come. Ernest was an old man now. His gray hair and the movement of his body was slow. The one great sadness of his life was that he had never seen the prophet long foretold. One day, a poet, famous for his ode celebrating the stone face, came to visit Ernest. They enjoyed each other's company, and yet each spoke sadly, for they longed to see the face enfleshed. The two talked long, and as the day grew to a close, it came time for Ernest's daily discourse on the great stone face. Each evening, inhabitants of the neighboring villages assembled in the open air for his stirring oration. There Ernest stood and spoke to the people, giving them what thoughts were in his heart and mind. Delivered with eloquence, the words were powerful because they accorded with his thoughts, and his thoughts had reality and depth because they harmonized with the devoted life he had always lived. The poet, as he listened, grew teary-eyed. The being and character of Ernest were a nobler strain of poetry than he had ever written. The face of Ernest assumed a grandeur of expression, so imbued with benevolence. And with the great stone face looming in the background, the poets suddenly realized what should have been obvious all along. For Ernest, he noticed, had a mild, sweet, beautiful countenance that looked like the stone face itself. Moved by an irresistible impulse, the poet threw his arms aloft and began to shout to all who would hear, "Behold, behold, Ernest is himself the likeness of the great stone face." And with all that, the people sitting about looked at Ernest and noticed that what the poet said was true. The prophecy was fulfilled. Ernest had become like this ideal. To me, this wonderful story is about you. And you have before you a wonderful image of great possibilities. You have before you in your imagination a dream of what can be. You have within you an awareness of what you would like to experience and who you think you are and who you think you can be. And as you hold an awareness throughout your life of that possibility, it will draw you into a greater experience of your own possibilities. According to J.G. Ballard, sooner or later, all science fiction becomes true. There's a reality in that. There's a truth in that. And so as we're thinking about what is and what is possible, I invite you to take time to really simply be in that space of acknowledging what's going on in your life in whatever way it's going on, but recognize it as not necessarily your permanent reality. But your true reality is what can be. Your true reality is in that divine potential that's within every one of us. It's that spark of divinity that is ignited when we tune into our true nature and when we listen to that place within us. Tara Singh quotes the Course in Miracles, and he says, "Nothing real can be threatened, and nothing unreal exists." And so I want to close today with an awareness from Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison was an amazing, amazing inventor, amazing man. You know, he spent hours and hours and days and months trying to develop the light bulb, trying to develop it. And I forgot how many, almost, it was like several thousand, I think, attempts that he made. And maybe that's an exaggeration, but I knew it was a lot. And someone said, "Well, you know, didn't you get discouraged after all those failures?" And he said, "What failures? I just learned thousands of ways that it didn't work." We all have the possibility of being those bright lights, and sometimes that is recognizing and learning what's not working in our lives and making a choice and making a decision to get off the track and not necessarily deny what's going on, but simply make a different choice, make a different decision. Edison said, if we did all the things that we are capable of, we would literally astound ourselves. We have amazing possibilities in front of us. We have amazing possibilities within us. And a big part of our work is to learn how to move from where we are now and what we're experiencing now into those possibilities. And so this week, our work is to really think about not focusing on, but acknowledging where we are and recognizing that there's something even more that we can move into from this place. So have fun with that this week. Play with it, take it out of the toy box and, do all kinds of fun things with it as you're thinking about what's going on in your life. You catch yourself worrying about something or fretting about something or stressing about something, put the pause button on, acknowledge it, and then move on to what's possible. Let's move into our meditation time. And so let's move into that comfortable place. Essentially breathe in and out. And as you breathe in and out, I invite you to gently relax the physical body, the body temple. Bless the body temple with thoughts of peace. Move into a place of stillness where we can be open to hear and feel that still small voice of Spirit. And in this place of stillness, I invite you to bring into your awareness some situation or circumstance or experience that may be going on in your life today that you would like to see changed. Just notice it, acknowledge it. And in your heart and mind, bless it and know that there is something that is moving you beyond that. And in your mind's eye, imagine and see that experience resolved in a way that is positive, that's uplifting. See it resolved. And see yourself in a place of feeling completion. Feel what it feels like to have that experience resolved in a good way. Maybe not exactly how you think it might be, but regardless of how you think it might be, see that it has been resolved in a positive way. See the good and feel what it feels like in you to have that experience already resolved, peaceful. And even take a step a little further and even go past that experience of it being complete and resolved and looking back on it and see yourself recognizing the gift and feeling a sense of gratitude, both for the challenge and for the experience of overcoming that challenge. Let your heart feel a feeling of gratitude that it was there, and you feel stronger now, clearer, perhaps even more caring and compassionate, or perhaps simply an experience of more understanding. In your mind's eye, feel what that feels like. And let that energy of gratitude come into your heart, knowing that you are right now moving into that resolution. And so you're open to the wisdom and the inspiration and guidance of Spirit, and what steps are yours to take that will move you even a little closer to that sense and that knowing and that feeling of resolution. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Blessed Spirit. Take a nice deep breath now. Feel that feeling of gratitude and well-being. Take another nice deep breath and gently open your eyes and give thanks.